Burleson 911, what's your emergency?
We have a bad accident. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Are you involved?
No.
No? Okay, do you know how many people are injured exactly?
I see at least 3 or 4. We've got multiple vehicles.
Okay.
I see at least 3 or 4 people.
Okay. Are they conscious? Are they breathing? I mean,
we have one conscious or one breathing. We have.
But not conscious?
Yeah. We have.
Okay.
It's very bad.
Burleson 911, what's your emergency?
Oh, sweetie, we got a horrible wreck out here behind Space Airport. It's horrible. There's kids laying in the street. There's cars in the ditch.
Okay. Are you with the accident right now?
Oh, Lloyd. Oh, yes. There's another child in the ditch. Oh, my God.
The Texas teen spared a prison sentence after a psychologist called him a product of affluenza, won't have any time behind bars added to his sentence despite a prosecutor's motion. Instead, Ethan Couch, who drove drunk and caused a crash that killed 4 people last summer, will spend an undetermined amount of time at a rehabilitation facility. The case caused fierce debate when a defense expert told the court Couch's wealthy parents coddled him into a state of irresponsibility, a term the expert called affluenza.
Yes, affluenza, which basically says he didn't know boundaries because his rich parents didn't give him any.
Dr. Miller, you say this 16-year-old boy is a victim of something called affluenza. It's a term you use. To a lot of people, that sounds like a made-up condition. It's not a medical diagnosis, correct? It's not a recognized medical diagnosis.
No, it is not, and I didn't intend for that to be when I used it.
There are absolutely no consequences for what occurred that day. The primary message has to absolutely be that money and privilege can't buy justice in this country, that it's not okay to drink and drive and kill 4 people, wound, severely injure another, and not have any consequences to that.
I'm sure that people thought that a kid going to a year of rehab and serving 10 years on probation was pretty much a slap on the wrist. Let me just say, this kid has screwed up his life. I'm guessing that this kid has nightmares at night about what he did. You can lock a kid up for a long period of time, but that may or may not be the solution to the problem. I get it that the community gets outraged when they hear these kinds of sentences.
You know, people see you and they don't see you as an adult yet. They see you as, a teenager. You're still trying to figure out the world, and so you're given like a little bit of lenience, which I think I personally still need.
I think what's imperative is that there have to be degrees of leniency. I mean, how much leniency can be granted to adolescents? Because during this period of development, it's essential that not too much leniency be given, but not too much punishment be given at the same time, so that adolescents can learn, children, teenagers like us can learn what is right, so that decisions that go against society's order aren't made in adulthood that can lead to serious consequences. So yeah, leniency and excuses are part of it, but there has to be punishment at some levels.
The main precipitator that we see for how kids end up in the juvenile justice system is that they're kids. I mean, at the end of the day, kids are impulsive, their brains are still developing, they make impulsive decisions, they make rash decisions, they make decisions that aren't necessarily based on cause and effect.
I would say the factors that get a kid involved in the juvenile justice system range from their family and home life. I would say peer relationships also have a huge influence on which kids end up coming into juvenile court.
So one of the big ones is definitely the environment that you're being raised up. So the environment can be in various levels. It could be the environment of the home, if it's a very dysfunctional home, where violence and crime is the norm and accepted and even valued, then you're more likely to become involved in crime. Doesn't mean that you are, it's just more likely. Add that if it's a neighborhood that also values and has social norms of crime and violence, then you're more likely, especially if both are a family and the neighborhood.
I think that we see a lack of resources for kids, a lack of ability to engage in or get the help that they need to find some of the structure that they need, or the resources that they need for types of treatment or things like that if they are struggling in school, struggling at home. But again, at the end of the day, kids are kids, and so a lot of their decisions are based in very impulsive they are impulsive, and so they don't consider the consequences before they act. And as a result, we see those kids in court, and the degree of that may be exacerbated by whatever their individual circumstances may be.
I would say kids mostly find themselves in trouble for drug offenses. Unfortunately, there's a lot of theft charges. There's a lot of criminal mischief, which is a fancy way of saying property destruction, whether that be graffiti or just destroying property. So nothing too major. We see a little bit of everything. We have everything from homicides to curfew violations. But I would say, unfortunately, by and large, drug offenses are what find kids in juvenile court the most often.
A kid comes from a higher socioeconomic status. Oftentimes those kids are trying to rebel in some way against parents, against teachers, against the system. They might be abused by their parents too, but those kids are also rebelling.
They get involved in pretty severe drug and alcohol activities, and they can access expensive drugs that can be deadly. I think sometimes they find kind of excitement in testing to see if they can kind of outthink or outsmart authority. And when they do that, I think they get involved in very risky behaviors.
Juvenile court. What is juvenile court, and how is it different from the adult system? Let's take a look. The first is rehabilitation. Juvenile justice court is focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. The people involved in juvenile court, including defense and prosecuting attorneys, work together towards helping the young person learn from their mistakes, identify any other issues such as substance abuse, problems with mental health, family dynamic, and what's best for their community. In the end, they hope to help the young person become a more positive member of society. The second is dispositions. Kids are not sentenced for their crimes, they are dispositioned. Once they have completed their court-mandated requirements, their record does not follow them into adulthood. The third is no minimum or maximum punishments. In the adult system, the punishments a judge can give are determined by the crime. But in juvenile justice, judges have the authority to order whatever they see fit for the youth and what they have done, regardless of the severity of the crime. Dispositions vary based on levels of support the young person has access to. So the question is, what happens to young people who lack the support of positive family members and role models, and who don't have access to the resources needed to fully rehabilitate?
Socioeconomic background has a huge impact on disposition in juvenile court because the state has limited resources available to them, whereas a kid from a wealthy family might have unlimited resources available to them. So while the state might have certain programs that don't have any beds available, so it might be the perfect program for a particular kid in his situation, but because there's not a bed available, and there might be another program that's not contracted through the state that a parent might be able to access privately, but if a kid comes from a family who can't access that type of program, then he suffers.
The difference is that when a higher income kid or a kid from a higher class commits delinquency, there are so many more resources pooled together to make sure the kid doesn't get institutionalized, for one thing, make sure the kid doesn't see a lot of the same problems that a poorer kid would.
Insurance is a big deal if you're trying to get into a program. How expensive some of these programs are if you had to pay on your own. Some of them are $10,000 to $15,000 a month for kids to be in them. Obviously, kids who don't have the resources, families who don't have the resources, are not going to be capable of paying for that.
Well,
Well, here's the issue. He has the resources to get rehab, but by allowing him to do so, you're not fixing him because you are reinforcing, you're giving him the choice and you're reinforcing his superhero complex or, his untouchable mentality because he thinks, oh, well, my parents got me out of it, my parents paid for my rehab, I clearly am untouchable. The system should be more involved should have been more involved in that process.
I'm kind of split because logically, yes, if he has resources, the system is failing, he should, and there's a better rehabilitation center, he should go to it. But why I'm torn is because it's not fair.
I think affluent kids, they face kind of a challenge in that their parents will move in and rescue them. And they do it over and over and over again until those children begin to believe that the rules and the laws kind of apply to everyone else, but they don't really apply to them. And I think it's kind of like I've said with troubled kids, you can go up and bump your head against the wall to see if the wall moves. And if it moves, then you'll probably come back and keep bumping your head against the wall until you figure out where that wall ends and now it hurts your head, right? Does that make sense? I think with affluent kids, they kind of hit their head against that wall and it just keeps moving. And so they escalate their behavior. Their behavior can worsen. They push greater limits. They get engaged in behaviors that actually are maybe even more dangerous than some of those other kids because they really do believe that someone will rescue them. It's a sad day when they've done something really severe and they can't be rescued. No one will come to rescue them. No one can.
A lot of people, when I talk about adolescent brain development, what they say to me is, you're just giving a kid an excuse to misbehave. It's an explanation for kids that get in trouble, and it provides hope. I give no excuses to kids that get in trouble with the law. But do we know that the adolescent brain doesn't think through consequences, that they display risky behavior, that they do stupid things? Yeah, it gives me hope that kids can get better. And by the way, everybody says, well, you're just talking about the non-serious offenders. Oh no, I'm talking about the serious offenders that can change their behavior. As a matter of fact, when you look at the data, we have more success with the serious offenders than we do with the low-risk offenders.
The reason that we're focused on rehabilitation is because they're still in a very crucial stage of development of self-identity. And what we want to do is take a young person who maybe comes from a difficult background, or maybe even not a difficult background, but has made a really horrific decision or a really horrific mistake. And what we want to do is be able to say to this person, we can still change what your identity of yourself is. We can change whether or not, or help you see yourself as a positive, productive member of society, rather than as someone who's just going to continue to be in the juvenile justice system and eventually end up in the adult system, or someone who views themselves as, oh, I always make bad decisions, I'll just continue to make bad decisions. And what we know from the research is that shame-based treatment doesn't work and doesn't encourage people, it doesn't help, and particularly with young people who have this fragile developing sense of identity. When we put them in a situation where we're shaming them and making them feel embarrassed, we're just cementing into their brain that there's someone who makes bad decisions, or that there's someone who is a bad person and needs to be treated like they're a bad person.